How's it going, guys? It's Diego from the Foot and Fist Sports Network, and it's time to talk about the fight fallout from UFC Denver. It was actually a pretty sad night because if you saw that Cowboy fight, it was hard for me to watch because it looked like he was actually mentally broken. And I'm actually a Masvidal fan, so of all the people to beat Cowboy, I'm happy that it was him. I'm in that division of it anyway. But at the same time, it was just sad to see Cowboy get beat down like that in Denver, a fight that he really wanted, and in a fight where there was quite a bit of trash talk. So of all the fights for him to lose, that probably was the worst one, especially at the moment where he was, doing so well in the division and looking like he could potentially be getting a title shot. So I'm just going to go ahead and start off with him. The next fight I want him to take is either going to be against a guy like maybe Gunnar Nelson, a guy who has a similar style but isn't quite as developed as him. Now, that's probably a bit too much of a drop-off for him because of how good he has been. But at the same time, Gunnar Nelson is a type of striker who he trains with Conor McGregor, so that he's been working with a very excellent striker. And over the years, we've seen that his karate style is actually pretty good. He just needs to build up a bit of power. And his jiu-jitsu game, in contrast to Cowboy's, would be a very fun fight to see. So I think that would be an interesting fight for them to make, but it might just be a bit too much of a step down for him. And I forgot who I actually thought that he should be fighting. So let me just take a look at this real quick. I apologize. That's right. The other two people I thought could be interesting for him were Dong Hyun Kim, who recently fought and got a decent win, a split decision over Tarek Saffiedine, but there's no shame in having a tough fight with Tarek Saffiedine, who is such a good striker. So that's an interesting fight. And the other one is Lorenz Larkin. I think those two guys are pretty much interchangeable because they are both young, up-and-coming fighters who have a lot of potential. Not really young, but they're guys that don't have the type of high-level experience that, say, somebody like Cowboy has and could test him, but they're definitely winnable fights. And they're definitely not young, upcoming talent. I apologize for that. I completely blanked out for a second. I think that would be one hell of a fight against any of those three guys. Like I said, Gunnar Nelson is probably a bit too much of a step down, but it could be an interesting tune-up fight. And then there's always the prospect of a Robbie Lawler fight, but I think that after losing to Masvidal, he needs to take a step back and build himself up again, as most fighters do. And over the years, he's struggled against some of the tougher guys in the first round. So I think that Robbie Lawler would present some problems, and I think he needs to get some confidence back because Cowboy is one of those guys who has had some confidence issues in the past, and I think that he needs to get one win under his belt before he can really start pushing with another title run. So let me know if you agree with me on that in the comment section down below. And now I'm going to talk about Masvidal, who scored probably the biggest win of his career, and in fact, I would call that without a doubt the biggest win of his career because if you look at how he was going lately, he had quite a few split decisions in a row, and it looked like, this was going to be one of those fights that he was probably going to lose a decision or maybe get finished late on, which is what I expected to happen. But he really surprised me. Now, I've always known that Masvidal is one of those top guys, and if you don't know that, then you haven't really been paying attention to him. His one problem is that he hasn't really been putting in the type of pressure and the type of aggressiveness that he needs to be putting on. Coming from a street fighter background and having the type of boxing and the quick hands that he has and the amount of power he has, he needed to be more aggressive. And the fact that he was sort of coasting in fights, not really coasting, but not really going for the finish, was sort of costing him, and he ended up with a few split decisions that probably should have gone his way in the first place. But we all know judging is pretty bad a lot of the times, and a lot of times it's kind of hard to really know what the judges are basing their scoring on. And so some of those fights he should have lost, and some of them I think he should have won. So his record is a little bit worse than it should be, but at the end of the day, he's always going to be one of those top fighters that the UFC loves to have because he puts on such entertaining fights. And I think that having seen the last two fights that he's had, he's definitely got his mind straight, and I think that we're going to see a pretty big rise for Masvidal in terms of contendership. There are really two names that come to mind, and this was actually recommended to me from a friend, so shout out to Marco Shepard. Sorry about that. He was actually the ones that put this name in my head in particular. Now, I was already thinking about Neil Magny, but he mentioned Robbie Lawler. Now, I think that Robbie Lawler is a bit too much right now because Robbie's still ranked, number 3, number 2? I think he's probably ranked number 2 behind Wonderboy Thompson. And as much as I would love to see that fight, and as much as it would be a barn burner, I think that it might be just a little bit too much for Masvidal right now. I would like to see him fight somebody like Neil Magny, and really go from there. I think that if he beats Magny, who is another top guy just like Cowboy, would really cement himself as a top 5 contender. And I think that with that win, then he would definitely earn himself a shot at either like Carlos Condit or Robbie Lawler, somebody in that range, or maybe even the loser between Wonderboy Thompson and Tyron Woodley, depending on how bad that fight goes for the loser and something like that. I don't think he's ready for a title shot. I think he's probably on the edge of being ready for a top 3 guy, but I think a Neil Magny is probably the fight that makes the most sense right now. Depending on, obviously, if they can get that fight to happen. He did call out the UFC saying, give me whoever you think could beat me. And he bet 200 grand in. That's probably just a ploy to try to get himself more cash. Either way, I like it, and I'm hoping that he will be able to get the W, because, honestly, he's one of my favorite guys in that division. I think that from the entertainment point of view, he would match up so well with guys like Carlos Condit and Robbie Lawler and some of the other 2 guys. Wonderboy Thompson maybe a little bit less, but Tyron Woodley would also be an interesting fight. And there's just so much for him in that division, and there's so many great contenders. I love that division so much, and there's definitely going to be a lot of fun fights involving Masvidal in the very near future. Now let's go ahead and talk about the winner of the main event, which in my opinion was sort of the co-main event, but it is the main event. That's Valentina Shevchenko, who put on one hell of a performance against Julianna Pena. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to put out my predictions video because I've been away for a bit, so I've been slacking off. That's the reality, and that's not going to happen anymore. But I actually predicted that Valentina Shevchenko was going to get the W. I thought she was going to hurt Julianna Pena and submit her. That didn't happen. It was a submission, but still, it was a very dominant win from Valentina Shevchenko, because what a lot of people don't seem to understand is that this chick, even though, yes, she is a 17-time Muay Thai champion, she is better at grappling. Or at least her stats show that she has more submission wins than knockouts. So, I mean, that's very, very, very dangerous for that division. I mean, Julianna Pena is one of those women that sort of reminds me of like a Cain Velasquez if Cain didn't have any striking. Because realistically, Julianna Pena, she just, at least in my opinion, I'm not an expert or anything, but in my opinion, I've been watching a lot of fights over the years, and it just seems like she throws a lot of arm punches. So when you're coming up against a World Muay Thai champion, it's not likely that you're going to do a whole lot of damage unless you get pretty lucky, like mixing it with a takedown and you manage to touch her and hurt her or something like that. I just didn't think that Julianna Pena was going to have much for her in this fight, and it turned out to be true. I mean, Valentina Shevchenko really looked good, and I mean, after seeing her dominate Holly Holm, or at least not dominate, but shut her down and really control the fight, and then seeing her beat Julianna Pena, I don't think there's really anything else for her other than a title shot. Her versus Amanda Nunes would be an amazing fight for that division, and this is coming from a guy who doesn't find the women divisions, except for 115, all that interesting. I mean, I don't find them as interesting just because of the difference in talent between most of the women, apart from like Amanda Nunes, who I find very, very fun to watch, and people like Valentina Shevchenko, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I find most of the women in those divisions so much less talented, or at least less skilled at the moment, that it's hard for me to enjoy it. But this is one of those fights that I'm going to be really, really excited about, and I look forward to seeing what happens there. As for Julianna Pena, now, I mean, we all know that she's a very tough woman. She's very promising. She's still pretty young, and she has the type of grit that will almost certainly make her a title contender eventually. Now, if you look at that division, there's really not a whole lot of challenges. I mean, Ronda Rousey would be an interesting one because they're both grapplers, and I mean, that might be a fight that Ronda Rousey could compete in. They both have had a lot of trash talk against each other over the years, but honestly, I don't think that Ronda's going to want to come back after taking such bad beatings. I don't think she's ever going to come back. I think she's done, and I think that Julianna Pena is probably going to have to take on somebody like Raquel Pennington, and Raquel Pennington, who was all on the same Ultimate Fighter show, and I can't remember if they actually fought, but I don't think so, has been looking a bit better as of late. I mean, her record when she got to the UFC was like 5-4 or 4-5 or something like that, and now it's like 9-6, which isn't exactly impressive, but it is an improvement, and she is getting better. And she's one of those chicks that even if she doesn't really have a lot of skill, you know for a fact she's going to go in there and throw down. So that would be an interesting-ish matchup, and I think that's probably pretty much the only one that makes sense for Julianna right now in terms of rankings and things like that. So that's probably the one that's most likely to happen, and I wouldn't mind seeing that. I'm not going to be excited for it, but it's not the most boring matchup they can make, and it's probably the best one they realistically can make in that division right now in terms of Julianna Pena. Now let's talk about Francis Ngannou, who honestly might be a future UFC heavyweight champion. I mean, if you look at what the guy brings, he brings explosiveness, he brings speed, he brings very heavy hands, and he's got a very, very good submission game for such a unexperienced fighter, I guess you could say, in the heavyweight division. He's only, 10-1 now, so he's not really unexperienced, but when it comes to fighting top-level guys, he hasn't really been there. You wouldn't really guess that if the first fight of him that you saw was his fight against Arlovski, because of how smart he took the fight. I mean, he was always staying in his range, and he knew that Arlovski has some problems. He likes to wing some. He gets lazy. I'm not saying he gets lazy, but it looks like a lot of times he sort of lets his hands linger. So he just got out of the way and hit him with a ferocious bomb, and then hit him with another ferocious bomb. And I mean, it wasn't even his best punch. Just like Brian Stan said, it was nowhere near his best punch. But he has so much power and so much explosiveness that even with one of his less, I guess you could say, powerful punches, he's still able to knock out just anybody. And Arlovski, granted, doesn't have the best chin, but he's still a very crafty veteran and a guy that always has to be respected, and is still a very, very dangerous guy. So for Ngannou to go out there and get such a dominant win was really, really impressive, and I think this guy has what it takes to be a future, if not champion, then definitely a future title contender. And I mean, considering how much he still has to grow, that's a very, very dangerous prospect. And even Dana White was talking about it. You know, you stack this guy up against some of the contenders in boxing and in the UFC, and over the years, as a heavyweight, this guy has such amazing physical gifts and just athletic gifts at the same time that make him a guy that you have to respect, and a guy that really has to be feared in that division. I don't know how much he can do right now, but I think that a fight for him against maybe the winner, of Overeem versus Hunt would be an excellent fight. I think that that would really propel him into being one of those top 5, top 6, maybe even top 7 guys, and really, really, really make him make the other fighters in that division take notice and really make him a top contender. If not, then I would also like to see him take on the winner of Derek Lewis versus Travis Brown. You know, it's a slightly lower step up in competition, but at the same time, it's a very entertaining fight, and it's one that would really test him. In particular, I think, against Derek Lewis. And now that Travis Brown's changed camps, you never know. He might get back to being the Travis Brown that we used to see, who was a very dangerous heavyweight and really like a potential prospect, a potential eventual title contender himself. So there's a lot of interesting movement in the heavyweight division, especially now that Brown is leaving Edmund Tarverdyan's camp. So we'll see what happens, but I think that there's plenty of matchups for Ngannou, and either one of those potential fights really make him a big step, make him take a big step forward, and are a huge step for his career. So I look forward to seeing what they do with Ngannou. And in terms of Andrei Arlovski, honestly, I hope he retires, because, I mean, if you just look at how this guy's going, sure, he had that resurgence for a couple fights where he was looking good and he almost got himself to a title fight. But, I mean, how many beatings can this guy take? Stipe Miocic destroyed him. I think it was... Who was it? Josh Barnett finished him. It was a pretty decent fight against Josh Barnett, but I think before that, I can't remember who it was, but even that, it ended brutally, and he's just had quite a few bad losses. And after being finished like that by Ngannou, I just hope that he retires, because he's such a legend of the sport. I mean, he's not like Fedor levels or something like that. He's not like Cain Velasquez levels, but he's a step down. I mean, he's one of the original UFC heavyweight champions. He's one of those guys in the heavyweight division that really mixed in speed and power and awesome striking with pretty decent wrestling and things like that. So he was one of the pioneers of the sport in terms of being an all-around badass heavyweight. So you have to respect him, and you have to hope that the guy gets out of the game before his brain is too beat up. I mean, right now, he doesn't seem to be showing a lot of really brutal signs of being punch drunk, but in the heavyweight division, you take such bad beatings in every fight, whether you win or lose. If you get touched, your head's going to take some damage. So I think that it's probably better for him to get out as he can, and I hope that he retires. If not, then maybe a fight with somebody like Alexei Oleinik. That might be an interesting fight, just because Oleinik is one of those guys who just got into the top 15, and Ngannou was ranked number 10, so you can't really go above anybody above a number 10. Has to be somebody under there, and I think that Oleinik, being another Russian fighter, he could be, I guess you could say, alongside Arlovski in a fight maybe in Russia, if they eventually want to do a Khabib Nurmagomedov fight there, and that could be interesting, if not somewhere around the eastern side of Europe. That would probably be an interesting fight, and other than that, I can't really see anything for Arlovski that I personally would want to see, because, like I said, I don't want to see him take any more damage than he really needs to. And I hope that he retires, just because, like I said, he has a great legacy, and he really doesn't have anything left to prove. I mean, but you never know. These fighters, a lot of times, they don't know when it's over until it's brutally over. I mean, look at BJ Penn with Yair. He came back, and that was a bad mistake. And I just hopefully Arlovski will make the decision to leave before it is too late for his brain. That's about it for the video, guys. If you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments section down below, and please share it with any friends that you think are interested in this, on any forums or whatever you think that mixed martial arts can be shared and enjoyed for everybody. And if you did enjoy it, please let me know in the comments section down below, and make sure you let me know who you want to see each of these fighters go on. Do you want to see Shevchenko fight for the title, and who do you want to see Cowboy fight, and who do you want to see Masvidal fight? Because I'm very curious about that. And make sure you subscribe if you want to see more of my content. I'd appreciate that big time, and please hit the like button. So that's it, guys. I will see you in the next video.